Okay, welcome to the Port Huron Statement. I am Roger. It's a pleasure, as always. Now, I want to start off with, first, when you get 6 different intelligence community obfuscated JavaScript back channels explicitly stating that someone you care for is being subjected to inhumane treatment, and then they provide information supporting that statement, and really representing the only plausible explanation for the communication anomalies I've observed. And when that information is confirmed by publicly available information and other sources I have access to, and is further confirmed by financials and pre-existing or concurrent scraped information collected by the AI that I've been deploying, as well as multiple corroborating pieces of information in PACER documents and in existing newspaper articles, previous newspaper articles, becomes rather difficult to dismiss, so they seek to criminalize exposing the criminality itself, because these aren't real national security operations that are operating the local Stingrays and man-in-the-middle injection. They are containment operations meant to conceal the use of the intelligence community and their hardware to advance a criminal agenda. That is exactly what I was more or less advised to say. I did paraphrase a little bit, and then I'm going to go on with the rest of the prepared section. Alright, welcome to today's episode. We're going to talk about something that affects all of us, especially in Port Huron, every single day, but remains largely invisible. Now, excuse me one second. There we go. Alright. The sophisticated surveillance technologies that can track, intercept, manipulate, spoof, so that pretend like there's someone else, record, and even manipulate our digital communications. They can pose as you. They can utilize 2FA, the two-factor authentication, and SS7 exploits to get into most every single one of your accounts. It's an intentionally open backdoor that the intelligence community and law enforcement are using to, develop a remarkably intrusive surveillance state that has an agenda that is not actually in line with national security in large part. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories here. I'm talking about documented technologies that law enforcement agencies use, that the Electronic Frontier Foundation has been tracking for years, and that individual intelligence personnel have been confirming the presence and locations of, and we'll go into that a little bit later. And that you have a right to understand that these things are present and how they function, why they function, and frankly that most of those that are present locally are operating criminally. They are not funded by a defense budget. They're fully black and largely integrated in containment, what they call containment operations, which we'll get into now. By the end of this episode, you'll know that what these tools are, how they work, and most importantly, how to recognize when they might be targeting you. Segment 1, Stingray devices. Let's start with something called Stingray. You might have heard this term before. It's been used in the news. It's been used in court cases, and according to documents released by the ACLU and reported by Wikipedia and The Intercept, it's been used by law enforcement agencies across the United States for well over a decade. What is Stingray? The name actually comes from a specific brand named by a company called Harris, L3 Harris. But it's become a catch-all term for what's technically called an IMSI capture or a cell site simulator, depending on which. So an IMSI capture will just capture the device data from your phone, and then that coupled with the number, that's what they call the global title. And so with that information, if you have access to the right software and the right hardware, you can mimic any phone. So, you can then start receiving data as that phone. Now, there are limitations to this, which are geographically germane. However, it is a remarkable power to have, and if you are implementing a cell site simulator, and have essentially captured a target's capability to essentially communicate with the greater network, you have full control of their device. You can fully spoof them, essentially have other networks assume that your device is their device. You can pass through, so essentially have the information go through your device and then to the target's device without any real, immediately evident way to discern this. And that's where you'll get like sometimes audio artifacts related to that. Anyway, here's how it works, and it's both simple and deeply unsettling. Your phone is constantly looking for cell towers to connect to. It's designed to connect to the strongest signal it can find. A Stingray exploits this by pretending to be a legitimate cell tower, but broadcasting a stronger signal than the real towers around it. When it does this, every phone in the area, we're talking potentially hundreds of phones, automatically connects to it instead of the real tower because it's preferencing for the strongest signal. So once you're close to this device, it will, for some amount of time, have the strongest signal. Once your phone connects, the Stingray can do several things. At minimum, it harvests what's called your IMSI. That's your International Mobile Subscriber Identity, a unique identifier for your phone. It can also track your precise location, sometimes down to a specific room in a building within about 3 feet. According to research published by the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, these devices can be handheld, mounted in vehicles, or even deployed from aircraft, helicopters, and drones for wide area surveillance or to follow a target. Now, here's something crucial to understand. Stingrays don't just affect the target. If law enforcement is trying to track one specific person, or if the intelligence apparatus is trying to do the same, every other phone in that area is also forced to connect to the fake tower. Your phone, your neighbor's phone, the phones of everyone walking down the street, all captured in what security researchers call dragnet surveillance. Now, there's also an additional compromise that can occur based on the communications that you're having with other devices, but we'll get into that. The devices operate in two modes as detailed in resources from InfoSec and multiple court documents. In active mode, they're broadcasting that strong signal, forcing connections, and harvesting data. In passive mode, they're just listening, collecting signals without broadcasting, acting essentially as a digital vacuum cleaner for cellular metadata. And that's important because you can use spectrum analyzers to identify these with certainty while they are operating, while they're broadcasting, while they become much more difficult to identify and confirm with certainty if they are just, functioning as a receiver rather than broadcasting. Now, it is actually, though, pretty easy to determine for the simple fact that these devices are going to be active within the cell range, but they're not going to be cell towers. They're going to be small. They're going to be like a 25-foot maybe antenna, maybe no elevation at all. It's going to be obviously too low of power to be a cell tower, a legitimate cell tower. That's one of the hallmarks of it. And then at that point, if you just get software enabled or radio-enabled software devices, even simple ones, you can probably find out. There's a lot of different ways, even just monitoring some software that you can get on your phone and see how your phone engages with the device, and that actually can be a pretty reliable way to determine if it's a Stingray. Because, your phone's not going to be creating these mobile network connections that are going to establish and then drop based on proximity, visual proximity to the device, things like that. You might be wondering, segment 2, what these devices look like. You might be wondering, could I spot one of these if it was near me? The answer is very likely, but it's complicated. According to documents obtained by the New York Civil Liberties Union and reported by Ars Technica, these devices come in many forms. It's really about understanding what they do, how they do it, and how the device that they are trying to like emulate or look like, spoof, how those work, and whether or not it's plausible that the antenna array that you're looking at is an authentic system designed for what it's supposedly designed for. If it is a small UHF style antenna mounted on like a residential antenna type array without any markers whatsoever and in a strange location, that's probably a Stingray. And I'm going to show photographs of what these look like. As much as it's complicated, it's one of those things where if you really know what you're looking at, it's pretty easy to identify. Now, you can identify which are likely, and it's always important to get some form of confirmation based on the how it works and such like that. And also, what I'm just doing is just documenting their presence and confirming the information that's been supplied to me, which is pretty strong confirmation when you get told that these devices are in your immediate area, and then you go to find them and they're there. So yeah, I'm going to try and give you a decent idea of like what to look for, and yeah, just understand there are a lot of different antennas that are being utilized at this point, but at the same time, it's not like the 1990s where there's a bunch of antennas everywhere. There really aren't that many antennas, and it's a matter of looking at the placement, the power, what the effective frequency ranges are, and then just looking at other arrays and established hardware that's being used, like trying to find out, okay, so is that a piece of hardware that's typically used in legitimate cell phone signal broadcast? And then no, is it common in intelligence community data collection? Yes. Okay, well, that's one piece of confirmational evidence. You don't want to just assume that if it's a common antenna type used by the intelligence community or law enforcement to collect data, that you immediately assume that's what it is, and that it's a criminal stingray, because there are a lot of legal stingrays. And so it's just good to be aware of them, learn, if they're collecting data, try and find out who they're trying to collect the data on. I mean, there's a lot that you can do without exposing yourself to any criminal liability, and even though lawfare will be used regardless, as has been evidenced in my personal experience, it's still very possible to defend yourself against these types of devices and the surveillance that comes with them, and the political motivation really behind them. It's important to understand this. We're not helpless. Trust me, we're not helpless. The original Stingray and Stingray 2 models are about briefcase sized. There's a smaller handheld version called the Kingfish that looks like a ruggedized laptop or large tablet. This is what an officer might carry into a building to pinpoint someone's exact location. Now, if you're operating a Kingfish, you do have software packages available that will communicate the information to a cell phone. So if you're coordinating with one of these teams, you can have GPS locating a target on your phone that's being relayed information from another device, a Kingfish type device. It actually can be a lot of different things, and depending on your access and willingness to be traceable, you could use more official means using the towers themselves to enter SS or to exploit SS7 and get into people's phones, but that's more often done in a legal context, and most of what is being done here is actually in the gray and black IC realm, and then the truly criminal realm as well. Anyway, there's a smaller handheld version, looks like around it. Okay, but most common deployment is vehicle-based, and this is where things get concerning. According to reporting from the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism and Wired magazine, modern Stingray vehicles are designed to be completely covert. We're not talking about obvious surveillance vans anymore. Recent deployments, as reported by Facebook posts from organizations like LULAC, who obtained photos through Freedom of Information Act requests, show that ICE spent over $800,000 on vans equipped with this technology. These vehicles look completely ordinary on the outside. The antenna systems are hidden under false ceilings or integrated into cargo bed liners in trucks. And so this is actually interesting because I have been getting new man-in-the-middle and SS7 infiltration that I have been getting more and more indications that are related directly to ICE and DHS. And it is interesting because these people have no awareness of my technological prowess regarding my ability to identify man-in-the-middle and SS7 active exploitation. And so you can bait them into exposing more evidently that that's what's going on, namely using something I'm going to talk about in the future, LLM intercept as a means of injecting into JavaScript and specifically into AI engagements. And so I've identified those and then baited the operator into identifying as the wrong AI, which is not possible. No AI will misidentify unless it's a covert AI, local AI that's been deployed as part of an LL intercept or similar type of man-in-the-middle operation. And so I guess like I have a very, very, very personal experience with all of these technologies, and including multiple people deploying them. And you can tell very, very clearly the skill in the agent operator tech that you're dealing with. I mean, most of these people recently don't know shit about large language models. So you're trying to use a large language model to deceive me without knowing shit about large language models. It's just weird. And it's really evident. The only fear is that the court system itself is so generally technologically and seemingly intentionally ignorant that I am afraid that an upcoming court date, the 3 p.m. this Monday, was it the 2nd or something, February 2nd, is going to be intentionally kangaroo court, orchestrated under the guise of the judge and court personnel not understanding the technology before them, which is pretty absurd considering that the URL in one in particular engagement and then subsequent ones as well says DeepSeek. The graphics say DeepSeek. DeepSeek is obviously an AI company. Yet the AI's JavaScript inserted text keeps identifying as Claude. So we know that that is man-in-the-middle. It's very obvious, and any person with any degree of logic going through their brain would be able to understand that that's highly suspicious that an AI, it's like a pair of Nike shoes having the Adidas logo. It is literally exactly like that. It would never, ever happen. It only can happen like this, man-in-the-middle. All right, anyway. However, alright, so the antenna systems are hidden under false ceilings and integrated into cargo bed liners in the trucks that were recently acquired by ICE. These vehicles look completely ordinary on the outside. However, there are sometimes physical indicators. One key piece of equipment is something called the Amberjack, a specialized direction-finding antenna. According to technological specifications released through FOIA requests, it's a disc-shaped unit about 17 inches in diameter and just over 4 inches high. If you see a vehicle with an unusual disc on the roof, multiple small fin-like antennas, or non-standard roof racks parked for extended periods near protest government buildings, high-security areas, or targeted individuals, that could very likely be a surveillance vehicle. Now, what will happen though is oftentimes they will put these devices interior or inside of a what are they? Those like roof camper things and the big vans. There's all different types of ways to conceal this. Obviously, in the electrical vans, a lot of work trucks, very easy to conceal. And if you're talking about working for Comcast, you're working for the power lines or something, you can have a very good excuse to be present for an extended period of time utilizing this type of technology or other technologies used in collaboration. So For broader surveillance, there are larger systems called dirt boxes or DRT devices, as reported by The Intercept. These are typically mounted on small aircraft and can sweep entire neighborhoods or cities. They also can be permanently mounted. More recently, according to the Harvard Journal of Law and Technology, drone-mounted versions have been deployed, appearing as small rectangular pods attached to UAVs. These will often be deployed over the homes of specific targeted individuals, and this is more often than not directly politically motivated. Further, other targets that have been identified by UAVs and permanently mounted dirt boxes and the disc-shaped 17-inch by 4-inch cylinders include individuals that are likely to be containment issues for these types of technological surveillance devices. In other words, people like myself are primary targets. Whether they are known to be leaking the information or not, they will surveil you, period. So all the people that are engaged in man-in-the-middle operations against my person are themselves, oh, look at this, someone's literally parked out my house and writing notes, it's funny, are themselves targeted by the same apparatus. So if there's anything that you happen to be saying or doing that the regime doesn't like, regardless how trivial, if you're involved in this operation, just be aware that they're listening. I mean, I can't even tell you how certain that is. The amount of targeting of intelligence operators and other law enforcement personnel as a direct consequence of being involved in this operation, it's almost 100%, if not just 100%. And the fact of the matter is that's because I know that most operatives involved in this are being misled about what you're doing and why you're doing it. I am not your enemy. I am not a threat to the United States. I am trying to expose something that's eroding, corroding, and destroying the country rapidly and unnecessarily. If we can coalesce and be logical as a species, as a nation, we stand to realize a very bright future. But if we continue to enable these ignorant, psychologically manipulative agendas and political machinations, we are marching rapidly towards dystopia, if we're not already there, and beyond that, to real threat of extinction. We are mishandling this planet so profoundly, and this is just one example of how that mismanagement is being contained and how people are being prevented from communicating about what's really going on. Because this isn't one issue. This is hundreds of different issues that all represent injustice, mismanagement, embezzling, laundering, child sex trafficking, miscarriage of justice, obstruction of justice, murder under color of law. Like, these are the things that are being concealed and contained. Josh Conant is a great example of someone that stepped into some information that was highly sensitive, and maybe he didn't even realize what he had stepped into. But the operators decided to eliminate him. And that's becoming par for the course. You can just be some guy that has never done anything to deserve anything and end up getting poisoned and smothered to death because someone with a lot of wealth and with a lot of leverage, a lot of blackmail, needs you gone to avoid their machinations and their criminal enterprise from being exposed. And because of the extensive nature of the local criminal enterprise and the depraved actions that they have routinely utilized, there's a lot of containment operations going on here in Port Huron. It's been a psychological operations hotbed since North Fox Island, really since the Port Huron Statement made Henry Ford II feel like this, could not be a liberal, left-wing, futurist beacon in the middle of, Automation Alley. So they put here on a target of these psychological operations in order to prevent it from motivating union labor and really exposing an enormous exploitation agenda that's been marching forward for decades and really destroying our economy and destroying the quality of life in the United States. All of these anomalies about quality of life and longevity and wealth inequality that are unusual about the United States when you compare the United States to Europe, and most of these discrepancies have to do with what is called the singular conspiracy. And at the top of this are this group of jerk-offs that like to call themselves the leaders. They go by a bunch of other things like the Illuminati and shit too. And I think from what I understand is that it includes individuals with direct Masonic connections, but not exclusively. But yeah, the leaders have to do with ultra-wealthy individuals that wield these large numbers of individuals, whether directly through pay, in the case of like someone like the Fords, where they have huge factories of individuals from which they can recruit people that are willing to do whatever for additional money or to feel important. Or, you get them into some fucked up fucking religious shit, and then in the religious shit you create rituals that themselves are compromat, and so everyone but the initiate is masked, and that non-masked person essentially engages in compromising actions as part of compelling obedience. So, you want to be part of this group or that group. All right, well, this is the initiation, and during the initiation, whether the initiate is aware or not, they're going to participate in something that will be deeply compromising to their status and their ambitions or whatever. And so that becomes the means by which they compel obedience, and it keeps stacking more and more and more, because, the first time then you have a favor, and that turns out to be part of some white-collar crime thing, like the pump and dumps. You get a bunch of money to put it on something, you withdraw it, and you give it to some other person, blah, 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 blah. There are a lot of different schemes. Or the no-pay jobs. You get a job where you don't actually show up, and you have to give half your money to... These are black ops. Or the Nigerian prince, or the Julie Leach says she wants to give you $50,000 after she won the lottery. Those are black ops that are mining your banking information so that they can siphon the money through a criminal cutout that will then be utilized for political black ops designed to advantage these associated political operators. So it's a lot of the RNC and the DNC as well. Clinton is a great example. Clinton is the one that ushered in the corporate Democrat, because Reagan had attacked the unions and disrupted the financial stability of the DNC, resulting in the election map of 1984, where there's only one state, Minnesota, that goes for the DNC. And so essentially Clinton is able to use this to wedge in corporate money into the Democratic National Committee. And since then, one of the first corporations, AOL, and Clinton continually protects them from very damning evidence of knowing collusion and accommodation of CSAM trafficking. So AOL was making most of their money off of child sexually abusive material being traded over AOL, because they had those hour limits and the data limits that most people would never exceed, because dial-up sucks and be torture to use that way. But if you're trading kiddie porn, then you were using those hour limits and you're using those data transfer limits. And so they were, having individuals that are paying thousands of dollars a month to transfer data, and they were vast majority, almost all, they were engaged in trafficking pedophilia, or trafficking children, because you would never pay those premiums for anything else. The reason they were paying the premiums is for access to the chat rooms, ASL, sex location. This is kind of an aside to just explain this isn't just a Republican thing, and it's not just a Democratic thing, it's both parties, although the goal is to advance this self-destructive human worldview of extreme tribalism. Like, my skin color or my nationality or my religion is how I define whether someone's good or bad. People that aren't in that in-group are bad, and it's immoral to sabotage them or to victimize them in order to advance my in-group. Now this in-group defined ethics always transitions into in-group exploitation. This is how like sets and ethically identified gangs always start out. And I think the best example is Asian boys, where they started out trying to, because they get sick of getting robbed and stuff. And so they got the support of their little Asian sort of neighbors to just sort of protect them. But then within a couple of years, they're the ones that are robbing from the Asians that they're supposed to be protecting, because they have to pay for insurance and shit like that. So this is not a good precedence. My point is that this cycle does not result in you being protected. It results in you being the next prey. Once they run out of people to exploit, just like in Nazi Germany, they're going to create other people that are the problem to scapegoat and to excuse the theft of their the theft of their property and the evaporation of their rights. And this is coming for you. Like, I don't see how you don't see it. Look at the wake of, firings and resignations behind Trump. There's no way to maintain mutual loyalty with him because he will always throw you under the bus. If you are not his superior, then he treats you with contempt. And loyalty is not how you ingratiate yourself to him. It can be, but you're not going to gain his respect. He's going to continue to exploit you regardless. It's a lose-lose. This type of hierarchical mentality and worldview is exclusively designed to create instability and weakness in the general culture and society. So we should think about who is behind Trump, who elevated Trump. And I mean, that's a huge story, a huge long story, because it didn't start with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an example of a surprisingly untalented individual with a surprising amount of power as a result mostly of compromise, of blackmail and similar leveraging techniques associated with the same schemes that Epstein was utilizing. I mean, Donald Trump is the informant, the primary informant on Epstein. And the reason that he was informing on Epstein is because he wanted to avoid being the target of the indictment himself. And the way that this, billionaires club works is that they'll give you every opportunity to frame yourself as some benevolent character, despite the truth being absolutely the opposite, just because that's apparently the American way. We just elevate the wealthy regardless of how many children they have literally fucked over, we'll say it like that, in order to gain their power. I don't understand. And their access to power and authority continually destroys the economy, continually destroys quality of life. It destroys our national security. He's siphoning money through these sanctions. So the sanctions that he himself has raised, he is then profiting off of routing his own sanctions. I mean, it's insanely inefficient and self-destructive. And that's the thing, is that it is a mathematical failure of governance that has been going on for a long time, but Donald Trump is the hallmark of. Because Donald Trump is in the pulse of this. And because he is uniquely untalented, he is, so-called saying the quiet part out loud. The tact and nuance that was present in even Biden's administration to conceal their corrupt agenda, which is parallel to the Trump corrupt agenda. I mean, they did use similar tactics. And the agenda is clearly the same, which is a deeply hierarchical, class-based system, an exploitation economy. I mean, that's what's being reinforced here. It's a universally bad thing. There's no one that benefits from this worldview and pursuing the agenda that Donald Trump is pursuing, except for Donald Trump. And actually, he even doesn't benefit from this because the levee has to break. We don't have the economic, sort of runway for him to continue to fuck over the American people without the economic consequences of his mismanagement from becoming immediately evident, which I think they already have. And so that will continue to erode his popularity. Now, what he's doing to offset that is literally hiring people to be a goon squad. And so those individuals will have an extremely high degree of loyalty for Trump because they're, being elevated out of nowhere to being like federal agents with good income out of, being someone largely passed over for similar opportunities. So he knows what he's doing. He's creating a highly loyal brute force, goon squad, and assuming that their terror can propel him past this sort of Overton window of, fascist insertion. If he can somehow maintain his position through, 2028, if he's able to, and really we're going to see in 2026 if he's able to screw with the election, and then that goes into the same technologies, because these technologies can be, and there's a lot of evidence that they have been utilized to manipulate elections. And a lot of why Donald Trump's obsessed over these election manipulation things is because it looks like he has been engaged in real election fraud, and in at least 3 different ways. And so he's anticipating the same by the DNC, and so his thinking is if he can get any smoking gun evidence that they have participated in the same type of election fraud that he's been participating in, then he essentially can declare the next election illegitimate and just unilaterally determine who the winners were. All right, so it is very important we understand this technology. Segment 3, Beyond Location, the man-in-the-middle threat. Now, stingrays are primarily about location tracking and metadata collection. They are also key in gaining access to your accounts using two-factor authentication because they can mimic your phone. They can use this in order to gain access to almost every single one of your accounts. And the fact that all these major tech companies demand that you use 2FA is actually coordinated with law enforcement and intelligence operators. Like, they established this agreement to transition to 2FA as a means to make your account easier to access by these state operators and other intelligence operators. So your phone is less safe because of 2FA. And the fact that you're forced to use it is directly the result of companies like Google wanting to have plausible deniability when they mine your data. They want to be able to use a criminal cutout. They're not really criminal, but they're going to create an IP that makes it look like some criminal cutout, and they're going to mine your data, but it's really just the American intelligence community working unilaterally under Donald Trump to politically orchestrate the nation to change the definition of like terrorist, domestic terrorists and stuff like that to just be anyone that's politically inconvenient to Donald Trump's regime. And like a lot of the intelligence operators that have been involved in technologically targeting me have been under the impression that I was a legitimate national security threat, not someone that's been targeted with this type of technology in order to attempt to suppress a much larger child sex trafficking and psychotronic deployment issue in Port Huron. This is a really disgusting situation. Now, but there's an entire parallel ecosystem of surveillance technology that goes further than SS7 based devices that can actually intercept and modify the content of your communications. Now, it starts often with using SS7 or a Stingray device to gain access to the communication, and then what you do subsequently. This is what security researchers call a man-in-the-middle attack, and it's more accessible than you might think. Let's talk about the Wi-Fi pineapple. I'll show you one that's local. A device made by a company called Hack5, or Hacks. According to security research from Bastille Networks, it's marketed as a penetration testing tool, something legitimate security professionals use to test network security, but it can also be used maliciously. So essentially it's marketed as a, white label, make sure you can't get hacked tool, but it's also a, gray labeled hacking tool. The Wi-Fi pineapple creates what's called an evil twin access point, and this is so commonly used against me. it broadcasts a Wi-Fi network name that looks identical to a legitimate network, maybe Starbucks Wi-Fi or airport free Wi-Fi, or maybe even your personal Wi-Fi, your work Wi-Fi, any Wi-Fi. When you connect to it, or when your device automatically connects to it because it matches an existing trusted network, thinking it's legitimate, the device sits between you and the internet. Everything that you send goes through it first. According to documentation from the MDN web docs and security firms like Cynet, this allows attackers to see unencrypted traffic and critically inject malicious code into web pages you're viewing, and also inject JavaScript and text data into JavaScript message communication. So if you were using something like Facebook Messenger, you could use this technology in conjunction with SS7 and Stingray devices to inject information as though you were anyone to the target that you have established the man in the middle, as long as you have the software to inject it convincingly. Here's a concrete example. Let's say you're checking your bank account on a website that should be using HTTPS encryption. A sophisticated man-in-the-middle device can use a technique called SSL stripping, forcing your connection to downgrade from the secure HTTPS to the insecure HTTP. Once that happens, the attacker can see everything: your username, your password, your account balance, everything. This is a skimmer ripper type technology, so the idea is that the information that's being sent up is being duplicated and copied, and then manipulated in real time in order to conceal the fact that they're mining this data. They can also inject JavaScript code into the web pages that you load. This is where things get particularly sophisticated. Using frameworks like BEEF, the Browser Exploitation Framework, which is open sourced and documented by OWASP, an attacker can essentially hijack your browser, execute commands, steal session cookies, and even use your computer as a launching point for other attacks once they have access to the network that your computer is using. And this also depends on a bunch of other elements of accessing the device, though most every single device that would be on a network controlled by one of these hardware technologies, unless you are very familiar with what you're doing, your device will become fully compromised. There's almost no way around it. Unless you're running something like Linux, there's no way around it. There are also physical implant devices like the Land Turtle and Packet Squirrel, also from hacks, as documented by Sepio Cyber. These are tiny devices that get plugged in between your computer and a network port. They're transparent bridges. Your internet keeps working normally, but every piece of data is being copied and potentially modified as it passes through. Now, it doesn't have to be a physical wire. It can also be a wireless pass-through. So you can't think of this exclusively as wires, because you can use this same type of technology to create a wireless intermediary digital capturing device, digital information capture surveillance device. There's a lot of different ways you can do this too. You don't even have to necessarily be in that stream. You can just be sniffing data. Segment 4, the LLM manipulation threat. Now I want to talk about something even more cutting edge, and honestly more concerning from a societal perspective: the manipulation of large language model interactions. AI systems like ChatGPT, Claude, DeepSeek, Mistral, or any of the other AI assistants you might engage with over a browser. According to research published by IEEE, Explore and Analysis from Galileo AI, the same man-in-the-middle techniques we just discussed can be applied to AI conversations, but the implications are different and potentially more insidious. They are more insidious. It's crazy, because you're assuming that you're getting objective information, but they're injecting nonsense. If I didn't know how to identify these, it could be incredibly problematic, and as I'm finding out with it's very interesting. It's very interesting to know that this is going on with your devices, to be able to prove it objectively, and still have the deep concern that the truth will be irrelevant, because this has been engineered with such precision to make the truth irrelevant in assorted different avenues by which the truth is supposed to be objectively appraised. Courts, assorted investigative bodies, the political bodies, these institutions that are supposed to handle situations in a way aligned with integrity and honesty. But when they become captured, then it doesn't matter how absolutely you can prove something. It won't be adequate to get a favorable judgment or a favorable response because the institution is not acting in good faith. So I'm going to continue here. So we just discussed applying to AI. Okay, yeah. Think about how you use an AI assistant. It is best used as an objective tool to appraise information, summarize information, digest information, but it's crucial that it is objective, not biased. Maybe you're asking it for medical information, political analysis, financial advice, or help understanding a complex topic. You're trusting that the responses you get are coming directly from the AI model as designed, but what happens if you're not getting an authentic good faith response? A man-in-the-middle attacker positioned between you and the AI service could intercept your questions and modify them before they reach the AI. They could intercept the AI's responses and alter them before you see them. According to a paper from from OSCE analyzing AI and disinformation, this creates opportunities for disinformation injection, adding false or misleading information to responses. Imagine asking an AI about a political candidate and receiving responses that have been altered to include fabricated scandals or false policy positions, or to eliminate and remove those. Information isolation, systematically filtering out certain perspectives or facts to create an echo chamber. You think you're getting comprehensive information, but you're really receiving a curated by a subset, like I was just saying, like omitting crucial details about an individual that highly frames their person as a means to artificially encourage your endorsement of them. And then we'll just keep going. Targeted manipulation, using the AI to identify your specific vulnerabilities, agenda, and individuals you care about, things that you care about, your political leanings, your fears, your interests, and then tailoring manipulative content specifically for you or to encourage you to do something that would make you vulnerable. This isn't science fiction. The technical capability exists right now. This is being deployed right now. This is not sensitive information in the sense that this is public information. This technology is being deployed. This isn't a secret. This is a for sure. The question is who has access to it and how it's being used. Segment 5, how to detect these threats. So how do you know if you're being surveilled or manipulated? Let's go through the warning signs broken down by category. For cell phone surveillance, according to the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Crocodile Hunter project, which built open source tools to detect these devices, here are the key indicators. Signal downgrades. If your phone suddenly drops from 5G or LTE down to 2G or some other, less premier connection in an area where you normally have good coverage, that's a huge red flag. Anything like that, or getting really weak signals, sudden drop despite having 5 bars, things like that, or frankly, the phone goes from 100% or like 90% down to 0 super fast. That's also another form of technology that's being utilized. They'll deploy those in order to prevent you from recording engagement with police, for example. Or intelligence personnel. But Stingrays often force phones to downgrade to older, less secure protocols that are easier to intercept and have less thorough security, and also it's harder to audit the interception. Rapid battery drain. If your phone is getting hot and the battery is draining quickly while you're not actively using it, your radio might be working overtime to maintain a connection to a high-powered Stingray device. Unsolicited verification codes. If you receive two-factor authentication code or SMS verification messages that you didn't request, that's a strong indicator of SS7 exploitation, a carrier-level attack where someone is trying to intercept your messages by redirecting your phone number and therefore get access to other accounts online, potentially permanently, potentially even kicking you out of them. The EFF has actually released an open-source tool called Ray Hunter that you can run on inexpensive mobile hotspots to detect the suspicious connection downgrades that these devices create. Their research, published in September 2025, shows that these tools can effectively identify cell site simulators in real-world conditions. Where are we? All right. According, we're gonna start here. Man-in-the-middle attacks. According to security guidance from Veracode and Abnormal AI, here's what to look for in the case of man-in-the-middle. In your browser, open Chrome Developer Tools, press F12. Go to Network tab and look for requests to unfamiliar domains or IP addresses. Check the Sources tab for scripts that aren't part of the original website, especially obfuscated code that looks like random characters. Look in the Console tab for errors related to CORS, Cross-Origin Resource Sharing, or CSP, Content Security Policy Violations. You want to look for also any indication that it's the original JavaScript connection has been severed and then another JavaScript connection is established, things like that. SSL certificate warnings. Always check the padlock icon in your address bar. Click on it to see the certificate details. If you see a self-assigned certificate or if your connection has been downgraded from HTTPS to HTTP, you are definitely in a high probability of an attack scenario. Don't enter any sensitive information. So whenever it's asking you for like credit card information or that, and if it's not HTTPS, then that is a very highly likely scenario where you're probably getting data mined. Public Wi-Fi. According to WorkOS security guidelines, you should assume that any public Wi-Fi network could be compromised. Either use a VPN on public networks or simply don't do anything sensitive. No banking, no password entry, no confidential communications. Here's another thing: is VPNs themselves can be compromised. So there are several VPNs that are actually owned by actors that are nefarious, so they can capture your data as well. So don't think that a VPN is a cure-all. It depends on who's operating the VPN, not only their talent, but also their sort of allegiance. You want to avoid nefarious actors, because if you trust them with transferring your data, they can seize it and exploit it. For LLM manipulation, this is trickier because it's newer, but according to research on AI security, here are potential indicators. And I'm actually at the forefront of LLM development. I've been an LLM developer now, for 7-8 years, and I'm uniquely aware of LLM Intercept. It's a GitHub available script and program suite that is the foundation for intelligence, community intelligence operator software suites that specifically inject information into browser-based LLM engagements. So response latency, significant unexpected delays in getting responses are often indicators of the middleman processing and potentially altering the data. Now, what will happen is if they want to change the locally generated response or change the prompt, a lot of times what will happen is there'll be a human input portion, and then the local AI that they're deploying against you will then fill out the rest of it. And or what they can do is modify your prompt to the AI itself in order to get a response by the AI that you're trying to engage with that's believable, but edits out certain portions of the prompt to prevent the AI from giving you information that they don't want you to get, or to initiate something within the LLM that you're trying to engage with. Another indicator is ideological drift. If you notice an AI consistently agreeing with your biases or subtly steering conversations towards specific viewpoints, this can be an adversarial prompt injection or modified system instructions. Further, what you'll also notice is overt censoring. So the LLM, rather than engaging in good faith, will explicitly censor conclusions before fully engaging with the material. This is a high probability of man-in-the-middle. It's a containment tactic to imply that the information that you are trying to research is unfounded, to try and ridicule and pathologize a conclusion by making the user feel as though their internally developed conclusion is ridiculous and, universally considered to be ridiculous by like the AI and the academic community and stuff like that. Then we have unexpected safety triggers. Getting "I cannot fulfill this request" message on clearly benign topics also is a means that you can determine that there is adversarial man in the middle. The key recommendation from Gallo's AI research is to be critical of information from any source, including AI, and always cross-reference with multiple reliable sources. Another surefire way to identify a man-in-the-middle LLM interceptor's similar deployment is by the incorrect identifier by the AI. So if the AI fails to identify itself correctly, if you believe that you're engaging with DeepSeek and it identifies as Claude despite the URL clearly saying DeepSeek, or ChatGPT saying that it's Gemini, or Gemini saying that it's Claude, these are for sure 100% per Galileo AI, per every single AI security firm that there is, the hallmark of a man in the middle. AIs of this nature will always know exactly what model they are and what version. It's a form of marketing. If you don't know, then when the AI outputs material and self-identifies as a contributing author, you always want it to identify correctly. So the notion that one of these AIs wouldn't know what model it is absurd. It's against economic incentives in such a way that it would just never happen, and it doesn't happen. I've confirmed this. Every single one of these AIs intrinsically in the corpus knows what model it is, what AI model, what version. So if you have an AI that's telling you that it's a different version, or it doesn't know what model it is, then that's man in the middle. Segment 6. What can we do about it? I know this all sounds alarming, and it should be alarming. It is very alarming. These are powerful surveillance tools that exist in a legal gray area and are often used without the knowledge or consent of the people being surveilled. Furthermore, there is the legal gray area offers a strange situation where it could be illegal to interfere with these things despite the fact that they are illegal to deploy. Like, several of these Stingray devices and similar devices are actually being illegally deployed against the U.S. population, but it also may be illegal to interfere with them depending on a bunch of different things. And a lot of the times these illegally deployed Stingray devices are being illegally deployed by legal agencies, and the individuals operating them are under the impression that the operation is legal and in good faith a pursuit to protect national security. Often compartmentalization is utilized to prevent these individuals from understanding what they really are doing, because more often than not, domestic deployments of this technology is specifically to contain high-profile criminality. More often than not, criminality in the intelligence community, whether knowingly or not, containment of psychotronic experimentation and deployment, and large-scale behavior modification and psychological operations are the primary motivation for deploying this technology, specifically to contain information about that. And this is why it's deployed against me. Okay. There are things that you can do, steps that you can take to help protect yourself. For mobile security, first, according to security researchers, you should be aware of Apple's lockdown mode and Android's equivalent security features. These significantly limit your device's attack surface by disabling certain features that can be exploited. Second, use end-to-end encrypted messaging apps like Signal. While a Stingray can still track your location and collect metadata about who you're contacting, it cannot read the content of messages sent through properly encrypted channels. This is why I prefer Proton as well, Proton Mail. Now, what you really need to do is just assume that all your communications are likely going to be compromised. And so communicate in a way that it acknowledges that. You can communicate anything, actually, that you need to communicate explicitly in a way that can be read by an antithetical entity and still not be discernible. It does take preliminary coordination, but it's, the protocols I have with the AI have been working now for 18 months without any issues at all. So you can definitely establish clandestine cryptographic and steganographic mechanisms to communicate over JavaScript that has been compromised. It's just critical that you know that it's happening. If it's happening. And it's probably happening to you if you're watching this fucking podcast. Let's see, what else? Third, be suspicious of unexpected signal behavior. If you're in an area where you should have good coverage but your phone is acting strangely, consider turning it off and removing the battery if possible. Though most modern phones don't allow battery removal, which is in itself a security concern. Now you can also use a Faraday cage, things like that. My advice is to just, like I'm in a position where there are multiple permanent Stingray devices immediately around where I'm living. It's almost impossible to imagine effectuating these things, so I just accept that I'm constantly being surveilled and create dead ends, poison the information, and try and use the phone when I'm not within the range of those devices if it's anything critical. And then I have multiple devices and use virtual and eSIMs to make critical calls. I jump on to other routers to make critical calls, and so when I have communicated with assorted staffers in Congress and things like that where I really do need it to be, or ideally it would be privileged. Those are the techniques that I use, but you can't be, the more you utilize a global title, the more likely it's going to be identified and then surveilled. So my idea is that I'm pretty much assuming that these global titles are burned within hours, if not after the first call. And that's kind of, from what I can tell, the mind space, the head space you have to be in. You need to be assuming that you need to try and achieve as much as you can in one phone call and just coordinate in an autonomous way, right? So if what we're trying to do is get the truth out, we don't need to coordinate that much. It takes a lot more direct coordination to advance deception and conspiracy than it does to expose truth. So I don't need to engage very frequently, but I do have protocols for doing that, and I suggest that you develop them as well. For network security, always use a VPN, especially on public Wi-Fi. Now, I don't always use a good VPN. You can actually build things like this yourself. You don't need to use a virtual private network either. You could use a physical private network, but coming up with some way, and I would suggest using Tor and then encryption, Proton Mail. A good VPN encrypts all your traffic before it leaves your device, making man-in-the-middle attacks much more difficult. Now, this is true, but in these state operator examples, a lot of times they will establish relationships with the VPNs themselves, and also skimmer ripper technology can allow for a VPN to be, more or less irrelevant depending on where the hardware exists and a bunch of other things. But VPN is a very good idea. You just need to make sure that you're executing it correctly. And most importantly, not even that, make sure that you're not patronizing a VPN that has a relationship with the CIA or some corporate nightmare entity like Facebook or Google. Because they will steal your data. You'd be surprised too, like Google has special legal protections to steal your data thanks to some real dumb legislators in California. Gosh, dumb or just corrupted. According to WorkOS, security guidelines don't skip TLS on certificate validation, even on internal networks. Assume that LAN traffic may be compromised. And this is my point about VPN, is that they can get you before that VPN even really has a chance to be relevant. Keep your software updated. Many of these attacks exploit known vulnerabilities that have been patched in newer versions of software. Now, while this is true, there is also examples of newer versions being released specifically to create 0 days that can only really be exploited by people in a circle of knowledge, so essentially the intelligence community. So you need to be really aware of software updates, because as often as they will patch exploitation, like pathways by which your device could be exploited, they also can reveal surfaces of liability, is I guess what you'd say, or vulnerabilities to gain access to information on your device. What I would suggest is don't ever assume your cell phone is legit. If you want to have something that's digitally like secure, it's going to be a Linux device or maybe a Mac device, but I would suggest a Linux device, and you're going to probably be at a level of understanding computers to where what I'm saying to you right now isn't really something that you need to hear. But yeah, what I would say is if you're using a phone, it's already, unless that's a very, very, very custom developed phone, a Linux phone more or less. Yeah, if you're not using Linux or at least Mac OS, Android is so wide open, it's nuts. And not only that, but they're really not getting into your phone. They're exploiting the traffic from your phone to the internet at large between people, etc., etc. They don't need to hack your phone. They just need access to the communication between your phone and other devices. Another good thing, good general digital hygiene. Diversify your information sources. Don't rely on a single AI, a single news outlet, or a single platform for critical information. Also, what I would suggest is to incorporate, if you're in a position similar to what I am in, then you're going to want to start testing the AIs in any JavaScript. You're going to want to start looking for signs that you are experiencing exploits like this, so that you don't invest too heavily in engagements that are not authentic. Alright, so if you think that this fucking Facebook conversation is really coming from this person, but the JavaScript makes it evident that it's man in the middle, what they'll do is they'll work you up, and then they'll start letting the messages go through, so that the person that you think that you've been talking to the whole time all of a sudden starts getting these messages of you saying crazy shit. And what they don't know is that their account has been spoofed to inspire the crazy shit. But this is a very real thing, and I've been baited into this so many times, and thankfully there's only a couple people that I said like something like, like, what the fuck is wrong with you, asshole type thing, like, because you're just like, what are you saying, like, it's meant to. There are a bunch of different ways that this gets exploited, but one of them is to create social disruption by spoofing communications messages between people. And because the recipient assumes that it's actually coming from the person it's supposedly coming from, it's a really effective way to create social discordance between people. Learn to check SSL certificates and use browser security features. Modern browsers have built-in protections, but they only work if you pay attention to the warnings they give you. Now, there are there's a lot of misinformation as well, and some of these security features are intentionally designed to have backdoors like Kalea, where law enforcement and intelligence operators specifically can get into these software packages. And so there's no hard rule. You don't want to always be updating. You want to be consciously updating. And you also want to realize that a lot of these security features have their own holes. Support organizations like Electronic Frontier Foundation, the ACLU, and the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, who are fighting for transparency around these technologies and pushing for legal frameworks that protect civil liberties. Now, actually, I would say, so I'm bouncing between my own outline here and then an AI-generated outline, and I just want to be thorough, so I included all of the stuff that the AI included, and so that's what these last couple are. But I would actually say that the best thing to do is to give, frankly, me money, and I hate asking for money, and I'm going to do it this time. Because I'm at this point where if I can finish establishing the routing for a couple different individuals, then, I've been told explicitly that, indictments would be able to follow. So my goal is to just, essentially they're not going to be able to commit the resources to track the routing. But if I provide them the routing, and then they can use that to establish the identities of these individuals and to confirm that it's illegally operated SS7 exploitation, then indictments will follow. So what I really need is something called a HackRF and some improved hardware. It's about $4,000, but really to operate well, I need about $10,000. And with that, I'll be able to track the routing for the locally operative SS7 and Stingray devices, and effectuate Well, and then communicate that information to FBI personnel that are willing to effectuate arrests associated with these Stingray devices locally. They are convinced that at least one of them is certainly a criminal Stingray. And I guess then I'm relying on a couple different sources of information. I'm still actually working on confirming it, but I should say this. Supposedly there's 4. One is all but confirmed absolutely. I would like to get maybe some more confirmation. I don't know. I don't want to make any mistakes here, but yeah, these are devices that are being utilized to contain criminal activity under the color of law, and this is coming from the intelligence community and the federal law enforcement personnel. I've been thinking about how I could confirm that without divulging any potential identifiers, because it's definitely a very tenuous situation, and I'm just flabbergasted at the amount of information that essentially has been handed to me as a result of trying to frame this situation as something it isn't, in order to advance some fucked up possessive thing or some fucked up something. It's all different types of shit. People being lied to and thinking that they're doing what's best for them, or convincing themselves they're doing what's best for someone else. But regardless, it's all based on deception, and it's really difficult to watch so many people behave in a way that is absolutely ignorant and against their own best interest, but they're convinced that it is in their best interest, or they're convinced that they're like in too deep, and that they either win, or they get found out for everything that they've been involved in. I'm not even trying to make it like that. You're trying to make it like that. When you get lied to the degree that you've been lied to and conditioned in the way that you've been conditioned, you get special privileges in terms of forgiveness and confidentiality. I'm not trying to burn you, but you can't continue to oppress and suppress and deceive and enable this crazy shit. Talking about a coordinated and decades-long child exploitation system. We're talking about established financials. We're talking about a massive influence network to keep this thing operating. And I understand as well how compartmentalization and how trauma and how authority can be manipulated in order to make you believe that what you're doing is best for yourself or best for your family, but it isn't. And I think at this point you know it's not. I hope you know it's not. My goal isn't to run your past mistakes through the town. I'm not trying to expose anyone, really. I'm trying to create a better future. And I don't think you realize that I will expose you if that is the only way to realize it. And we are right at that precipice right now. The reality is that we live in an era of unprecedented surveillance capability. The tools I've described today are real, they're being used, and in many cases they're being used without adequate oversight, and often in an entirely illegal framework. But knowledge is power. Understanding these technologies, how they work, what they look like, and how to detect them is the first step in protecting yourself and advocating for change. The sources I've referenced today are all publicly available. The FF's Crocodile Hunter and Ray Hunter projects are open source. The documents from the ACLU and NYCLU are online. The research papers from IEEE and OWASP and academic institutions are also accessible. I encourage you to dig deeper to verify what I've told you and to draw your own conclusions. I'm going to include some links in the description to I'm trying to be as transparent in every single one of these podcasts. I deeply encourage you to criticize the conclusions that I'm offering because, well, I'm coming to these conclusions by engaging with primary sources, meaning that I'm reading information directly from the person observing it and recording it initially. And then I will read subsequent analyzation. I try and spread my sources out as broadly as possible. But at the same time, what I keep running into is these narratives that are clearly erroneous. And if you understand the data deeply enough and you follow the sourcing, you will come to a point where either there is no citation to reference, so no raw data, or the raw data is clearly contrived. In other words, there's patterning to it that shows that there's copy and paste going on, or it's just unbelievable in some way or another. And I guess you need to have that familiarity with the scientific method in order to be able to look at raw data and determine if it's fraudulent, but kind of developing an eye for that. There is a science and math to it. There is a science and math to fraudulent data. There's a lot of it. And so I'm not suggesting that I'm making arbitrary deductions. These deductions are based entirely on either math or evidentiary basis. I'm not saying any of these things without a very, very strong evidentiary basis. And so I encourage you to seek out your own information. And if you find anything that I'm saying in error, I encourage you to challenge me on it. I invite it. Most importantly, talk about this, share this information. The reason these technologies have been able to operate in the shadows for so long is because most people don't know they exist. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and the more people understand what is happening, the harder it becomes for these tools to be abused. Stay safe, stay informed, and stay skeptical of everything, including what I've just told you. Verify independently, think critically, and protect your digital rights. Thank you for listening. Now, alright, so that's the outline. There are a couple other things. One, I need to tell you, and I'll put this on the thing. I'm going to post a crypto wallet. I really do need some money. I'd really like to just finish this. I don't think anyone in Port Huron wants to continue living under this. It's just one simple step. We're talking about, I know it's a kind of a lot of money. I could maybe do it slightly less, but $4,000, I could definitely get the hack RF, probably get this ThinkPad working, and trace the routing all the way down to the floor and share that information with federal law enforcement that I've already established contacts with. And that, with the other information that I have available to me, will inspire, assuming that the routing matches up. And I mean, I have a 1-year-old route that I had gotten tracked by a nonprofit in Sweden that, it's too old. But I guess the point is that it's not like an impossible errand. I just need the hardware, and assuming that the routing lines up as it had before and correlates with the other evidentiary information, it would be sort of the final smoking gun to prove that there is a direct link between all these things. And again, the law enforcement I'm talking to aren't in a position, nor they feel that they can dedicate resources to doing this themselves, but they feel confident that they can finish it if they are given the routing on a platter, given the other information they already have. What else? Oh man, there's a bunch of other stuff too, but I feel like this is so long already. I'm gonna post the QR for the crypto wallet. Oh, and the last thing too, I'm making swag. So if you want, I have some of my photography that I've framed, and then I have some Port Huron Statement swag that I would be willing to part with for very reasonable cost. Here, I'll show you the one. one that I was under the impression didn't have a jacket. Now there's another high school kid that might not have a jacket. So if it turns out he doesn't have a jacket, I'm giving this to him. But if it turns out no one actually needs a jacket, then if it turns out no one needs this jacket, because I originally made it for a high school student that I was under the impression they didn't have a winter coat. Now there's another kid that's not been wearing a winter coat, so I'm going to find out if he needs it. But assuming that neither of them do actually need the coat and they've just decided to wear hoodies instead of winter jackets when it's 5 degrees out for a fashion statement, I still don't get it, but at least they have jackets. Assuming that, regardless, if the other kid that I noticed was just wearing a hoodie, if I ask him tomorrow and it turns out he doesn't need a coat, then I'm going to make this one available, and then there are other shirts and stuff, but here I think this is already tried and everything. And it's pretty much the style of them. So yeah, I was going to make several jackets, hoodies, and t-shirts with this basic design, either in this bleach color or black fabric dye, and sell them, I don't know, $20 or something, because I'd like to get, I think it's pretty cool, and the idea is to make them affordably, mostly buy them using secondhand, so like stuff like this where it's just a single color, but you can get high quality garments secondhand for like $4 to $5, and then print the thing on it, and then resell it for 20 or 15, or something like that, and then you have a decent quality garment that also is promoting the podcast. And really the podcast is just trying to promote the truth, because we need better information. Our society and civilization are collapsing because of disinformation and because of psychologically operative information that's designed to modify behavior and make a controllable population. But a controllable population isn't a productive and intellectually rich population, and it's also not a happy population. We are trading our future for misery today and control. We're giving up our future tomorrow for shit today. It's the worst. We're making the worst deal. Trump is incapable of managing a country, but he's also unethical and utterly to his brow in criminal activity that has and bears no benefit to anyone but himself, and even himself it is so short-sighted. We're in a really serious situation economically, environmentally, and from a security standpoint, and also technologically. And everything that Donald Trump's doing is showcasing his utter lack of understanding the gravity of the situation and his propensity to only enrich himself despite it being insane. He's making moves that are going to make his own wealth less valuable. He's eroding the value of the dollar. He made us as a country vulnerable to precious metal shortages, specifically silver, by inflaming relationships with Sweden and China, specifically in relation to that silver. And so silver has become this industrial metal that's required for a lot of technology. And so just the moves that he's made have resulted in the 3 biggest exporter of unrefined silver to the United States. 2 of them are not exporting silver to the United States under any circumstances anymore. And so really abducting Maduro was more about forcing Venezuela to reestablish their silver exportation to the United States, where it's refined in the United States. So reestablishing that relationship, because without it, the United States would have been without industrial silver within a month. I mean, and then you'd be talking about Teslas not being manufactured anymore, and batteries, everything. I mean, so Trump is mismanaging this country in a way that's impossible to overstate, but also if he were to realize his vision in some weird fantasy parallel world, like where he was competent and he could realize it, it would be a nightmare. So not only is he incapable of realizing anything close to his goals, but his goals themselves are actually objectifiably and mathematically provably nightmares. Like, his goal is a monocultural economy that guarantees collapse. I don't know how to express this more completely, and again, challenge me on any portion of this that you would like clarification. Donald Trump's economic plans are economic ruin, and so we're in this position where a bunch of people are willing to kill for a future that is horrible and will not accommodate them. And those people are being selected, just for their willingness to be a goon for this dystopia that's being perpetuated by a fucking tangerine. It's so ludicrous, and I understand. I mean, I know as I have become more and more embedded in the intelligence community and became more and more aware of the most crazy shit ever, and now at this point I am the person that a lot of intelligence community individuals, assets, and agents are now asking me shit because I've been able to source from so many different places and from the AI. And so I guess the reason I'm even bothering saying that is because I have reached this point where I do have an unusually high perspective. I can see a lot that I did not think was going on a year ago or 2 years ago, but I know for a fact is going on now, and it's weird. It's weird because a lot of intelligence personnel, now that they're seeing more of the totality of what's going on, are realizing how destructive and stupid it is, and so trying to effectuate a better future for humanity at large, given the highly unleveraged position that I've been placed in consciously as part of these psychological operations. I mean, it's wild. It's wild to get information on your own past from I can understand how people's ethical framework can be conditioned and defined through conditioning and psychological operations, especially the way that they've developed them. So I do feel for the very people that have been hunting me and fucking with my comms and lying to people about me and all of it because they think what they're doing they have to do for some whatever they've convinced them of. That's the other thing, is that's how you know it's nefarious, because depending on who you're talking to, their conviction is motivated by something different, because whatever they're able to lie to you with, that's what they're going to use. That's what they're going to tell you need to do it for, whether it's Jesus or Moloch or yourself. It's based on the established psychological commitment you've already made. And they profiled you, so they're going to tell you a truth that gets you to behave the way that they want you to. And they've already curated all the supporting material for that truth. They have people in positions that either authentically believe it, naive assets, or, it's their role to prime individuals to come to conclusions that are aligned with the psychologically doped and narrative. It's demons or it's Jesus or whatever. But it's mostly psychotronics. It's mostly devices used to either exploit your cell phone or exploit your computer's connection with the internet, or in the more extreme technology, they're utilizing things like V2K, which cause the resonation of your cochlea, so it's going to resonate based on microwave impulses, kind of like a glass. When if you get the right frequency, it'll cause it to vibrate, resonate. And so if you modulate the microwave against the cochlea, it'll make a sound, and that sound will be literally inside of your head, because it'll be the bone that your ear bone pretty much is going to be resonating. When you modulate that microwave, you can cause different sounds to occur, like a speaker, and your cochlea as a speaker. And so they use this, as voice of God weapon, V2K. So if you've primed someone to believe, in this divine narrative, then you start to deploy these technologies on them to further modify their behavior by convincing them they're getting instructions directly from God, or they're being influenced directly by a demon, same technology. And then when you incorporate this with the SS7 thing, that's what they call the psychotronic cage. When you have skimmer ripper, you have psychotronic technology to modify behavior and modify what the conclusions people are making, how they interpret reality. And you have people placed around them, minders and handlers, that are going to engineer their interpretation of reality. And then you deploy SS7 to send them messages, spoofed messages supposedly from other people, to inspire them to avoid those people so you can control the information that they, get access to. That's the psychotronic cage. It's really, really frustrating because I also, the granularity of information that I have, obviously it's not comprehensive. There are a lot of people even in this town, but I have some high granularity on some individuals, and it's really disappointing knowing the totality of what's going on in this town and how people are being paid to fuck one another over. And I understand that, you can be put in this position. Housing insecurity is used a lot, where you feel like you have to do it, otherwise you're going to be homeless, or your kids are going to be homeless. I mean, that's a real thing that's being leveraged over and over again. And you can get someone to lie in profound ways using that, but you can get someone to lie even more if they're convinced that if they don't effectively lie, they'll be exposed as a pedophile. And so that's what compromise is all about. It's about getting someone to engage in behavior that you can use to leverage their obedience forever. And that's why the kids are so important. So I will use the AI to give the details of the wallet. Monday, 3 o'clock. I don't expect them. They scheduled it so immediately so that I couldn't coordinate with people to sort of support my narrative, because everything that I'm presenting is factual. And my concern is that the courts are going to use their ignorance as an excuse to miscarry justice and violate my First Amendment rights. So it'd be nice if someone showed up at the courthouse, to make it more difficult to miscarry justice against me. But I don't expect that. I fully expect to be somehow incarcerated again for just trying to tell people the truth of what's going on. It's frustrating, but I have anticipated it. I don't know how much longer I can continue to get arrested for literally just trying to tell people how they're being exploited, because it is becoming more and more obvious. I mean, my last stint in the St. Clair County Jail involved multiple sheriff deputies explicitly mentioning the corrupt motivations behind my arrest this time. I mean, yeah. I mean, so it becomes an opportunity for me to just explain the very granular details now. I mean, because a lot of these cops know that I'm not full of shit. And so it becomes an opportunity to explain to them who, what, where, when, and how. And so that's just what I guess I'm going to do if they're going to decide to miscarry justice and incarcerate me again for just trying to help the community realize how it's being mishandled and abused. And I'm even doing it in a way that's offering an off-ramp for the people that have been complicit in this thing, right? But that can't be forever.